Oreste was born in Rome in 1927, entering a world that offered him almost no warmth or stability. From the very beginning, his life was defined by a profound sense of absence. He never knew his father, and his mother, struggling with her own heavy burdens, found it impossible to care for him. By the age of 7, he was placed in a charitable institution for children, marking the start of a long journey through the cold machinery of the state. As a child, Oreste was noted for being remarkably quiet and detached, often drifting into long silences that unnerved his caretakers. He did not play like the other children; instead, he seemed to be observing a reality that only he could perceive. This early rejection by his family created a deep psychological void. To cope with being unwanted, his young mind began to construct a private internal mythology where he was not a forgotten orphan, but a figure of hidden importance. The loneliness of the Roman streets and the gray corridors of the institutions became the foundation for a universe that would eventually span the stars. As Oreste grew into a young man, the gap between his internal world and the external reality began to widen. He struggled to maintain a steady life in the city, and his behavior became increasingly erratic and misunderstood by those around him. In his early 20s, he was involved in minor legal trouble, but it was clear to the authorities that his issues were not criminal, but mental. He was diagnosed with a form of schizophrenia, a label that, in the 1950s, often meant a permanent exit from society. He spent years moving between different hospitals, never finding a place where he truly belonged. Finally, in 1958, he was transferred to the Psychiatric Hospital of Volterra. This was a massive, fortress-like complex where thousands of patients were kept in a state of perpetual boredom and isolation. The transition was not sudden, but rather the final step in a slow process of social erasure. By the time he reached the heavy gates of Volterra, Oreste had been almost completely abandoned by the world, leaving him with nothing but his thoughts and the cold stone walls that surrounded him. Inside the walls of Volterra, the environment was designed to break the spirit through repetition and silence. For Oreste, the only way to survive the crushing weight of the ward was to complete his transformation into a new persona. He discarded his given name and adopted the code NOF4. He explained that N stood for Nannetti, O for Oreste, F for Fernando, and the number 4 was his specific identification within a galactic hierarchy. In his mind, the hospital courtyard was actually a sophisticated communication center. He believed he was an astronaut who had remained on Earth to act as a bridge between humanity and a sprawling empire in outer space. This was the cosmic element of his world, a way to turn his isolation into a grand mission. He claimed to receive telepathic signals through the magnetic fields of the Earth, believing that the metal in his uniform buckle allowed him to tune into these frequencies. In the courtyard he was a commander recording the secrets of the universe. With his new identity firmly in place, Oreste began his life's work. Every morning, when the patients were released into the outdoor courtyard for exercise, he would find his place along the southern wall. Using the sharp corner of his metal waistcoat buckle, he began to scratch symbols into the plaster and stone. This process was slow and physically demanding, requiring him to press his weight into the wall for hours at a time. The rhythmic scratching of metal on stone became the soundtrack to his existence. He created a visual language of spirals, stars, and strange geometric patterns. He treated the wall with the extreme discipline of a soldier, never rushing and never wasting a single inch of space. This stone canvas was his only connection to the outside, a way to make his internal cosmic reality tangible for others to see. He worked with a focus that was almost trance-like, ignoring the other patients and the guards, completely absorbed in the act of turning a prison wall into a sacred text. The content of the wall was as complex as the man who created it. Oreste wrote about the secret life of minerals and the hidden power of electricity that flowed through all living things. He described how human souls were tethered to the magnetic poles and how the sun's rays were actually high-speed messengers carrying data from the stars. He frequently mentioned electronic waves and atomic systems, blending the scientific language of the space age with his own mystical visions. To a casual observer, it looked like a wall of chaos, but to Oreste, it was a perfectly organized system of knowledge. He was recording the history of a galactic war, the movements of celestial bodies, and the telepathic conversations he had with space travelers. Psychologically, these writings were his way of organizing a chaotic mental experience into something permanent. By carving these ideas into the stone, he ensured they could not be erased by the doctors or the passage of time. He was creating a permanent record of a world that the hospital tried to deny him. For 14 years, the routine remained the same. Oreste would move slowly along the wall, adding layer after layer of detail. He became a fixture of the courtyard, a silent guardian of his own creation. He developed a deep, almost spiritual connection to the stone itself, believing that the minerals in the wall were alive and talking back to him. The other residents of Volterra mostly left him alone, sensing the intensity of his focus. He lived a life of poverty, owning nothing but his uniform and his buckle, yet he felt like the wealthiest man in the universe because he held the keys to the cosmos. His hands became calloused and his back became hunched from years of leaning against the wall, but he never complained. He was a colonel on duty, and his post was the stone courtyard. This period of his life was a testament to the incredible resilience of the human imagination. In a place designed to make men forget who they were, Oreste used a piece of metal and a wall to remember a version of himself that was powerful and free. For over a decade, the hospital staff viewed the wall as nothing more than a symptom of a sick mind. They saw a patient ruining the plaster, not an artist creating a masterpiece. In the late 1970s, a young nurse named Aldo Trafoli began to see something different. He noticed that the symbols weren't random and that Oreste was incredibly consistent in his mythology. Aldo began to photograph the wall and engage in slow, respectful conversations with the man known as NOF4. Through Aldo's eyes, the medical world began to realize that Oreste had created one of the most significant works of outsider art in history. The wall was eventually recognized as a profound human document, a 180-meter-long epic that challenged everything society believed about mental illness and creativity. Aldo became the translator for Oreste's world, helping to preserve the story before it could be lost forever. The discovery didn't change Oreste's daily life, but it meant that for the first time, his voice was reaching beyond the asylum gates. As the 1970s came to a close, the laws regarding psychiatric care in Italy changed, leading to the closure of many large asylums like Volterra. Oreste was eventually moved to a smaller, more modern facility. While this was meant to be a more humane environment, it was devastating for him because it separated him from his wall. Without his stone canvas and his daily mission, the cosmic kernel began to fade. He stopped carving, as the new buildings didn't offer the same ancient stone surfaces he required. Meanwhile, the original wall at Volterra was left to the mercy of the elements. Because it was carved into outer plaster and soft stone, wind and rain began to slowly eat away at the symbols. The epic story of the galactic empire started to dissolve back into the gray dust of the building. The decay of the stone mirrored the decline of the man. As his work disappeared, so did his connection to the cosmic signals he had spent a lifetime recording. It was a slow, quiet end to a monumental effort. Oreste Fernando Nannetti died in 1994, leaving behind a legacy that continues to haunt and inspire. He is remembered not as a victim of a broken system, but as a visionary who refused to let his mind be confined by four walls. His 180-meter diary remains a symbol of the ultimate power of self-expression. Today fragments of his wall are preserved in museums, and the ruins of Volterra are visited by those who want to touch the stone where a colonel once spoke to the stars. He remains the eternal astronaut, forever traveling the cosmic paths he carved into the cold stone of an Italian asylum. His story reminds us that the stars are always reachable, as long as you have the courage to look up. Don't forget. I will see you at the bottom of the well.